Hey there, rebels. How y'all doing? Look at this. I'm so rebellious today. I'm filming this without pants. No, in my truck. I assure you I'm wearing pants. But today, Miss Williams and I are going to tackle an age-old question. Question as old as time. Well, not that old. Our favorite locations based upon the amount of activity. So this isn't just, went there, had a wonderful time, really liked the cuisine, the architecture was nice, I had a good hotel room, or I stayed on location, I had a big tub. But in terms of activity, I'm gonna have to split this up a little bit, because like here in the States, places like Waverly never disappoint. The old tuberculosis center down in Kentucky, one of my favorite ones. There's been times where I've just sat there on the third floor at the end of the hallway, and I like to play a lot of music in my investigations, not for TV, they don't let us, but just for myself, and I'll play a lot of music from the time period. So for there, I play a lot of like big band music, like 1940s, Glenn Miller and that kind of stuff. So I'll play that and just sit quiet and just sit and watch, and you'll see shadows walk in and out of the doorways and down the hallways, and it's just such a cool place to be. And if you get over the fear part of it, and I think that's such a big deal, like listen, it's paranormal investigation, right? It's reaching out to the other side. The idea that it has to be scary, it's absolute bullshit. I really feel like it's more impressive that we have these amazing glimpses of the other side rather than, everything's scary, everything. Like if you're there to look for this stuff and you see it, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. You're this close to seeing and touching the other side at moments, and it's wonderful. St. Augustine Lighthouse has to be another one. That was the first place I saw a full body apparition. I saw a shadow figure as a kid, and then spent years going to places that do not go do this. But I spent years going to places, out in the woods, abandoned buildings, that kind of stuff, and never really seeing anything, and mostly just, going out and exploring. But to have traveled with ghost hunters down to St. Augustine and done the lighthouse, and then to see not just the shadow figures that we recorded, but to see a woman in a dress walking around the top level was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And so that's still one of my favorites. And although I didn't do this one for television, Malvern Manor is out in Nebraska. Malvern, Nebraska? Or is it Iowa? I always get it confused. Dang it. Somebody fact check this. But Malvern Manor, absolutely amazing place. And what I love about Malvern Manor is it's very unassuming. It's definitely kind of creepy to look at, but it's like an onion, It's like an ogre. It's got layers. It's got layers of activity because it was used for multiple things over the time. It was a hotel. It was a nursing home. There were some people there, maybe kind of psychiatric care. There's so many different things. So you have different layers of activity that go on there. So it really kind of enhances the opportunity to have some type of interaction. And then if we're going overseas, there's only one place, man. One place that is my absolute number one place for paranormal activity. And that is the Clark Air Base, the hospital out in the Philippines. We went out there, and this was a place that was an outpost for our American soldiers during World War II, and I believe it was also used in Vietnam. And the old hospital there, so much activity. It's the only place I've been to where everything they said we would experience, we experienced. It was really cool too, because the client was an older man. He was a security guard there for many years when they were trying to repurpose the building. And he had told people about the white misty apparition that he saw, the footsteps that he heard, the American soldiers, crying out in English in the hallways. And when he told people this, they said he was crazy. They said he was nuts and that he was a drunk, and then he made up stories. And we witnessed all the things. We documented almost everything that he asked us to. And if we didn't document it, we witnessed it ourselves. The footsteps, the white misty apparition, the disembodied voices. We got EVPs. We got everything, man. When we sat and we played that evidence for him, this guy just broke down crying. And we actually had to stop filming during the reveal because he was so overcome emotionally with just having this validation that yes, this was real. That is my number one place overall. And absolutely blessed to have gone there. It was falling apart. We had to put plywood over holes in the floor. We had to make sure we taped off all the elevator shafts. Everything was falling apart. But man, when it came to activity, no place has ever beaten it. And night after night, it wasn't one of those places where one night it was hot, the next night it was cold. We had activity every night there. And so that is by far my favorite place for paranormal activity out there in the Philippines. Worldwide, baby. Worldwide. Now we shall toss over to my good friend, Miss Kris Williams, television's Kris Williams. Tell me, if you will, and all the good people watching at home and across the planet, and maybe even aliens, what is your favorite places for paranormal activity?
Aliens and no pants? I don't even know where I'm supposed to go with that, you goof. As far as locations with activity, I can think of 3 places right off the top of my head that have either stumped me or they've kind of taught me a lesson to some degree. Like Dustin, at the top of that pile is Waverly Hills, and I think that's true for most investigators. I can think of 2 experiences that I had there with Dustin, actually. One of those took place in the body chute. The body chute is like this underground tunnel that starts at the top of a hill and goes to the bottom of a hill, and they say that the bottom of the hill there used to be a train station. They would use this body chute to wheel dead patients out the back of the building and down the chute so that the patients wouldn't be discouraged to see how many people were dying on a daily basis. We were in there and we were seeing lights and we're hearing footsteps and other shuffling noises. It was crazy because if we're at the top of the body chute, we look down it and we'd see the flashes of light down at the bottom and we'd hear footsteps. So we'd run all the way down to the bottom, which took a bit of time, and there'd be nobody there. And then once we're at the bottom, we'd see flashes of light at the top and we'd hear footsteps at the top and shuffling at the top. Now we're running uphill in this underground tunnel to get to the top to find nobody there. After a few times of running up and down this damn tunnel, I said to Dustin, I'm like, why don't we set up halfway? We're gonna have half the distance to go, whether it's the top or the bottom, to figure out what's going on. So we set up halfway and Dustin had his flashlight and he's swinging it in front of him and he's swinging it behind him. 1 minute there's light in front of us, the next minute there's light behind us. And I remember at one point I went and I put my hair up, and as I was doing that, the light swung forward and we saw this misty ball of light, but it wasn't super bright. It was small, maybe like the size of a volleyball, and it was rolling on the floor down the tunnel at us. We both saw it at the same time, we both screamed at the same time, and then about 2 feet before it got to us, it just flattened into the ground and it was gone. It was wild because it left you feeling like there was an animal in the tunnel and we were getting charged by something, but what we saw was definitely not an animal. We jokingly called it the ghost skunk. The second thing that we had happen there that was absolutely insane happened on the very top floor of Waverly, the roof of a building actually. And on the roof, there's this walled in room with a lot of windows. They used to bring patients up to the roof to try to get fresh air because they had tuberculosis. So we're up on the roof in that walled in area and it's the end of the night. Crew is gone. It's just our team wrapping up our equipment. Nothing was up and ready and running. We were not ready for this. There was debris all over the floor. So it didn't matter where you walked, you'd hear crunching sounds anytime someone took a step anywhere. So I was standing there and I was wrapping up the cords from the camera that I was taking down, and I started hearing footsteps around me, the crunching footsteps. I remember being completely confused by this because I was hearing the sound and I could tell which direction it was coming from, but I could not see anything. So I was like, Dustin, and he's like, I know this sometimes happens. We're not ready for it. Things are going to start up. We'll wrap up all of our gear in one go and we'll get out of here so we don't have to come back up. I was like, sounds like a good plan. So we got all our gear wrapped up. My hands are full. Dustin's hands are full. We're making our way down the stairwell. We get out to the second floor where we had center set up and we take a left down the hallway. As we're walking, we heard 4 or 5 footsteps in the room to the left. And I remember looking at Dustin and his eyes are a little wide. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. So we start walking a little faster and we pass the second room on the left and we hear 4 or 5 footsteps again. And I look at Dustin and his eyes are even wider. And at this point, I had only started with them in June and this is October. So I'd been with them for a handful of months. So to see him surprised by what was going on, I started to worry. And after we passed that second room, we heard heavy stomping, running footsteps that came up right behind us. And I was thinking we were going to turn around and we're going to see Jason or Grant or Steve or Tango. Somebody's screwing with us because we like to scare each other. Every now and then. It was fun. And we turn around and there's nobody. I remember just being completely and utterly beside myself. I wasn't so scared I went running. I wasn't so scared I said I'd never return. I've been back there several times since. But those are 2 of the craziest experiences I've ever had, and it was in Waverly Hills. The second one would be Norwich State in Connecticut. I know a good part of it's been knocked down since we've been there. Anyways, as far as activity, I remember hearing a lot of doors opening and closing and some footsteps. Another investigator and I were working in one of the hospital wings. We had checked all the rooms for open windows because we're hearing doors moving. We thought maybe wind. Then we started checking all the doors, and the doors did not move easily. They're actually pretty well wedged against the floor. You really had to push them and make some effort for them to move, and then when they did move, you'd hear a really loud dragging sound. So we got set up in the middle of the hall and we started doing an EVP session, and we heard a door next to us move, and we both kind of jumped because it was so dark in there. We couldn't see anything, but we heard it and we knew it was close. Fortunately, we caught it on tape, so you can see myself and the other investigator standing there. You can see the door in the middle, and you can hear and see it move. The last location is kind of a sleeper, and it taught me a lesson. It taught me not to judge a book by its cover. Because when we rolled up on this place, I really wasn't too impressed. I was thinking, it used to be a funeral home, it used to be a church. Now it's a museum full of old stuff. I felt like all those three things added together, people were just on edge and just making something out of nothing. I never assumed again after this case. Because it was a weird one. I was working with another investigator, Kristen Gartland, and her and I had nothing happen when we were in there. We were in an area that was kind of like an L shape for the hall, and the front part of the L shape went out the front door of this location. And on the other end of this L-shaped hallway, I believe, it's been a long time since I've been there, was another exit that went out to like a small parking lot. When we would investigate locations, we made it a point to only go in and out of a location through one door, and we tried to lock all the other ways to get into the building. It was our way of controlling the environment. Well, we got to the end of our round of investigating in the location, and we're gonna get ready to swap out with another group. But at the end of each investigation, we do this like little rundown interview of what happened or didn't happen, or how we felt it went, that sort of thing. So we were set up for Kristen to do her little mini interview. We were sitting in the hall. She had her back to the end of the hall that went out to the front of the building. And in front of her stood the camera guy and another camera guy, because it was his first day on the job and he was kind of shadowing the guy who had been with us forever in order for him to show the new guy the ropes. Behind them stood me, and next to me stood a sound guy. And Kristen started talking about the investigation and how it went and how quiet it was, and all of a sudden we saw this shadow figure walk out of the right hand side of the hallway, and it passed the front door, and as it passed the front door, we heard the door unlock and it disappeared into the left side of the hall. It was crazy because here it is, this camera guy's first day on the job, first investigation, and he was just like, oh my god. I'm like, did you see that? And he goes, it was a man. I was like, yeah, it was a man. So I was just like, holy crap, right? It was wild. We all go running down there, and the first thing that I noticed is Kristen turned the handle of the door and she opened it. It was not locked. And I know that it was locked when we started. The other thing that was weird, which our crew typically didn't do, is they hung this very heavy black tarp type thing outside the front door and windows, and I think they were trying to keep light play from coming into the building. So when she opened the door, the tarp fell, and the whole way down to the door I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's somebody outside, they passed, it's their shadow. But like, I was also thinking, you saw legs. You know you saw legs. So when the tarp dropped, it made it very clear that whatever we saw wasn't outside the building. It was inside the building with us, and I have no idea where the hell it went. We went from going to wrap up our investigation to jumping back into investigation mode. Now, off that stretch of hallway to that front door were two viewing rooms that branched off of it. So that dated back to the funeral home. We ended up setting up in the first one closest to the front door, and there were these two couches that sat facing each other with some sort of table in the middle. Our sound guy was sitting behind one of the couches to stay out of the way. So we were sitting on these couches, and I am not somebody who goes off feeling. I'm not a medium, I'm not a sensitive, I'm not a psychic, I don't do any of that. However, this is the one and only case that I can think of where anything remotely close to this happened. We're sitting on the couches facing each other and we're doing an EVP session, and all of a sudden the space just felt like there were 200 people in it, which would be way too many people for that little room. And it felt like all of these people were kind of just closing in on us. I just felt really claustrophobic almost instantly. Air felt heavier, I felt closed in, and it creeped me out. I said to Kristen, I'm like, this is so weird. Do you feel that? The air is heavier, it's harder to breathe in here, and I feel like the room is closing in. I feel like there's 200 people in here. And she's like, yeah, I'm feeling that too. Eventually that whole feeling lifted, it went away, and it was just like, wow, that was really freaking weird. But the crazy part is our sound guy came up to me later, and the funny thing about him is he was a very religious man, very solid guy, absolutely loved him. And he was very respectful of what we did, even though he wasn't really that into it. And I don't know that he really believed in it a whole lot. He was very respectful of it. But he said to me, Kris, I was feeling that too. Seconds before you said it. He looked kind of not spooked by it, but kind of like a little unnerved. That location definitely taught me a lesson, and I will never, ever again judge a location based on its exterior or cover. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you have a question you'd like us to answer, please leave it in the comments below.